Okay, so welcome to the podcast, Stephen. It's fantastic to have you on today. Thanks for your time.
Good to be here. Nice to be involved.
So for those who haven't come across you and across Movement Park, help us understand your kind of background and perspective a little bit more. So, tell us about your own kind of journey in sport as a youngster and how that's taken you to where you are now.
Well, my kind of background is pretty straightforward. As I was a judo player, and a judo player through and through. Both myself and my brother done judo from a very early age. I think I was just going on 10, and maybe people will know David out there. He's kind of out in the circuit a lot. We did judo and judo from ages really early. We did do a lot of different sports as well, but predominantly they were always to make our judo better. We did swimming, we did wrestling, we did lots of running and various other things. But again, it was pretty much just to make our judo better. We found I think it's very, very key to my story and maybe lots of other people's stories. I found an inspirational teacher very young in our life. And that teacher and those boys and girls and pack that we met really early on became our life very fast. To the point as in most of that group way back then, those early kids years are still very much friends and they're very much involved in judo and they play key parts of judo in the landscape. So that early inspiration and that early engagement from a teacher that was very, very playful. He was always in some cases he was always just one step ahead of us. He wasn't a high level player. He was very much a lot of the time learning out of a book and bringing it to us and saying, "What do you think of this, boys?" So it was always a very, very playful environment. And we quickly started traveling as a pack or as a gang or as a group, and those friendships were installed all the way through our life. That mix with a really strong family unit. Mum and dad were always very, very supportive. That was just cemented our experiences in our early part of our careers. But I think the most important part is finding that inspirational teacher. We never had very many friends at school. It became about the club, and we started traveling all over the place. So from there on, then once we started to compete at judo, then obviously that hook, that competitiveness as two brothers, we liked a good old fight and a good old rumble, and the competitiveness. If somebody was feeling off for one day, that if you're doing it, I'll do it. Kind of drove you through those kind of teenage years. But if we're looking back, once we were 12, 13, then we kind of understood that we would have loved to be Olympic champions, and that kind of focus and vision of that dream was huge, and it was a burning desire both in myself and in David. So that set the rest of our careers until early 20s. I wasn't the strongest competitor. Looking back in my career now, it's probably more the mindset. I never believed I could win, which many children out there are. I'm always second best, and unfortunately or unfortunately at the time, David was always that stronger competitor. So it's always interesting looking back that of a child that automatically starts to win and the confidence that grows from that. And then somebody that's always coming second or third and how they figure themselves into the big bad world. So as a competitive player, I wasn't always the most successful. And that has its detriments to your thinking. But at some point you've got to kind of drop off that full-time desire of doing something and winning and being world champion or big bad medals, and move into another avenue, which obviously is coaching and where I am today.
So talk us through that transition to coaching. What was that journey like? Because again, that's like a whole nother, you go to a deeper level of understanding and a deeper level of, commitment again on a different kind of sphere.
Yeah, well, the coaching thing is, I think it was always bubbling there. And again, it goes back to that inspirational teacher. Our inspirational teacher, his name was Duncan. I think if Duncan had been a rocket scientist, we would have been a rocket scientist. You know, it wasn't judo, I don't think we fell in love with. It was that teacher. If he taught whatever he taught, it was the methodology of the teaching. It was the engagement and the inspiration and the friendships. Then you fall in love with a good old rumble and the competitiveness of the physicality of judo. But we're always a very technical club. We were always trying to, it wasn't about the winning, although winning is important, and that's what structures are built on, I suppose, squads and all that sort of thing. But it was always, let's pick a technique of the day. And if you scored with that technique, you won something silly like a Mars bar. So it wasn't about the medal, it was about the achievement of what we're working on and how we put that into process in the competitive field. So when we moved over to coaching, it was, as all players, you understand, you just do something, don't you? You just do it automatically. And slowly, you pick away of that, oh, that's what I really do. That's how I can deliver it. As a competitive player, I had to walk away for a little while to process or the disappointment as you see at that time. But slowly but surely, judo pulls you back, and then I think the long term, when you learn your apprenticeship, as I call it, it was when I went back into teaching schools full time. I started a judo business and started to get into teaching full times, and that was the time of before active schools. So again, it was all about engagement and inspiration of not just the young children, but of local schools. So if a school liked us and we got a relationship with the school, then the school went to judo in, and they could see a lot of schools think, oh, judo, they're going to teach the kids how to fight. But the beauty of judo is and martial arts is the backbone and the ethics and the morals and all that sort of stuff that comes with it. So by doing schools day in, day out, and doing lots and lots of mat time of all sorts of ages and all sorts of behaviours and social deprivation, and coming from Glasgow, and then working with club players that are paying you to teach the child, all these different mixtures, I think I class those years as my apprenticeship years, and really understanding your delivery style and how you communicate with people. Whether your session is a half an hour class plan, the class comes in and it's cut down to 15 minutes. What do you take out? What do you throw in to still inspire those kids? Because you want them then to come to your club as a pathway. So all those years of chopping and changing and thinking on your feet teaches you that, you know, you're half a comedian, you're half a showman, you're half a teacher, you're half a, you know, you're half a big brother. You're playing all these different roles, which always stands you in good stead for switching over to that proper role of a teacher. So I think those years really put a lot of good work in, and a lot of hours on the mat, which I've got to do to be good at anything. So yeah.
So looking back on those various roles in serving your apprenticeship and, you know, your time with Judo Scotland and what you're doing today, have you kind of put your finger on what is the kind of underlying driver or the why for you? Does it come back to being that inspirational coach, or is there something else?
No, I think so. I mean, from working in the schools and stuff like that, then my club grew and grew and grew, and I think that's always what is underlying of the whys I do things is that first engagement and that inspiration of you know, the role model, all these things, the good ethics and morals and the moral compass of, you know, what's right and wrong, and to try hard at something, and that's what makes you good. So when I moved on from my club life and my large club, I mean, I had a lot of players at that point in national squads and GB, and I'd been doing it for a good 10 years system, and it takes that long to build this system. I was tired, you know, dealing with players and traveling all around the place and stuff like that. And at that point, I was teaching as a national coach as well at development stages. So I was teaching from grassroots all the way to GB level, and that large age group is quite exhausting. So I was traveling a lot. And I had a young family, so the national developments job came up for Judo Scotland, and that was a change in direction as well for me, because it took me off the mat. But again, it's still about inspiring people, whether it's players, whether it's coaches, whether it's mums and dads of understanding. It's still inspiring people to stay engaged with sport in general, and that's still in that particular instance, it's judo. So my years at JudoScotland, I still classify them as inspirational years. The years at JudoScotland gave me a chance. I struggled, stepping off the mat. I didn't want to step off the mat as a full-time coach. And as anybody stepping off the mat as a player and anybody stepping off the mat as a coach, these things are quite dramatic at times, but major learning curves. At the time at JudoScotland, I was thankful that I'd done a lot of travelling, got to go to Canada, and I had a lot of time. My role at JudoScotland was very much to kind of look at the technical aspects of judo and say, right, okay, to keep people in judo, why they're leaving, and it basically comes down to confidence and competence. If you hear coaches saying, "Oh, he can't do a certain technique," and well, okay, he might not be able to do that technique, but what are the underlying things pinning that technique? Is it hopping, skipping, jumping? It's a very technical sport. Throwing somebody over your back on one leg when they're trying to get away, So people always say gymnastics is that life skill sport. Well, try doing judo. It's like gymnastics, but the horse is pushing you back, so there's force there. So it's a very complex sport. So my role at JudoScotland was to kind of look at these things, and that's when I first really, really got interested in fundamental movements and physical literacy. And I was introduced to so many different models, as well as paying attention to the maturation and skill development and all these other things that Sport Scotland were talking about and other people were talking about at the time. So that mixed being involved with the coach education systems. It's a big mad mix of things that I was allowed to play with. I was allowed to talk about. We were allowed to rip apart. And the kind of initiatives that I designed and implemented at that time really kind of pointed me in a direction. I started to show signs that this judo thing, it wasn't enough. It was starting to be so un-judo. It was starting to be so fundamental, especially when I kind of went to tutor for Sport Scotland. I was getting involved with cycling coaches and physical literacy and all the other coaches coming together, and you were kind of starting to say, right, okay, you always think your sport is a lifestyle sport. You talk to basketball coaches, talk to cycle coaches, they all think it's a lifestyle sport as well. Everybody thinks their sport is a lifestyle sport, and you're right, everybody's is a lifestyle sport. You're doing it for all your life. But one of the great things about judo is the grading syllabus. That is a fundamental, it's a backbone of our sport. It's a development tool. You understand that you're getting better because you're going up those grades. And I kind of started to understand that the syllabus round about that was very, very important. So that time at JudoScotland was invaluable for me as a person and to move on to what Movement Park was going to be.
So talk us through that transition. So obviously you said stepping off the mat as a full-time coach to going into the development side of things was a challenge. I imagine stepping away completely to Movement Park was a whole nother challenge.
No, well, it was the right time at the right place for a Movement Park was always bubbling under there from that moment that I started playing with physical literacy, and then away people didn't know what does physical literacy mean, So I remember having active schools coordinators asking me what physical literacy thinking to myself, wait a wee minute here, so we've got a lot of work to do, traveling to Canada and stuff like that. It made you realise, whoa, right, okay, so this is what it really means. So the idea for Movement Park was always bubbling under there, but the Commonwealth Games was a major factor. Obviously, judo was a very successful sport in Glasgow. And it kind of, one of my judo clubs at the time got thrown out another centre for having too many mats and too many members. And at that point, I was kind of saying, wait a minute here, like, we're being removed from centres for the past 30, 40 years for having too many members, too many people being active. And So I thought I had looked at a building in the old industrial part of Glasgow in South Street about 12 years before. So at that point, I thought, right, okay, let's go and look at that building and make the change. And at that point, understanding funding streams a little bit better and Sports Scotland a little bit better. I approached Sports Scotland for a facility grant, and we were lucky enough to get it. So for three or so years, I was doing both. I was balancing Movement Park and JudoScotland. Obviously doing Movement Park just as a rising idea, but it slowly became bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point as in both myself and JudoScotland says, right, okay, I can't do both full time. It's impossible. So I made a decision to do Movement Park full time. But those early years was a massive learning curve. I mean, from being a frustrated judo coach to running a full time charity, organising a board and all the stuff that you learn from running a board, to a changeover of board, was probably where my biggest learning curve was. But hopefully, fingers touch wood, we're kind of getting through that now, and I've got a grasp of it. Got a grasp of it now, I hope.
So talk us through that journey, the kind of birth of Movement Park. So you've gone from, that kind of catalyst, the Commonwealth Games, and there being a spotlight on Glasgow and on, you're saying a natural kind of progression from judo into that physical literacy. Where did it go from there, from being an idea to being like action, where you actually were looking at funding streams, and how did that whole process look like?
It kind of happened pretty fast. It was myself and two other judo players at the time, the Miller brothers. We kind of thought, right, okay, well, it was predominantly a judo idea at the start. We'd been thrown at another venue and thought, right, we're going to get somewhere here, get a bit of funding and open a dojo as such for Glasgow and launch it off the back of the Commonwealth Games. I'd always been paying attention to other sports, and as I said, judo is a fantastic sport because of the ethics and the morals and what that kind of stuff that the martial arts give you. But I'd always been paying attention to urban sports because it's got that culture, it's got that coolness, and I always felt it was something that could add to martial arts and a mixture of movement that was a nice mix. So that's what I kind of brought to the table. The funding streams and things like that, the building just happened pretty, it moved along quite easy. The board part was a difficult part, and we'd made a decision really on it in Movement Park that we were in an area of social deprivation. So we are in a G14 in Glasgow, and the whole idea was about building confidence and competence around children. That is the main focus, and giving children a model that they could come and play with various different sports and various different movement styles for a very price that's very affordable. Sport is getting more and more expensive, and if you're going to 4 or 5 different clubs, it's hitting your pocket pretty hard. So the system is not really kind of built for your kid to be able to do parkour, skateboarding, basketball, judo, circus tricks, physical literacy classes. And I thought, right, okay, let's start playing with that idea. So that was the whole idea. And looking at it with the initiatives that I played with JudoScotland, it was very much, I wanted to move into this area of family participation. Us as adults, as we all know out there, that it gets harder and time becomes harder. So you predominantly put your kid into the family classes, and then take over the coach. We wanted to try and design classes that the whole family could come and play together, and mum and dad could see maybe making a fool of themselves or making something mistakes or making, and the kids can play with their older brothers no matter what's age. So that mixture, I feel, was something that we wanted to start to play about with. But the urban sports thing was key, because what we decided pretty early on is we weren't going to use high-level coaches. We were as much for young coaches coming through from the local community. young volunteers coming and just dipping in and out, and then sort of maybe saying, oh, I quite fancy that, and a pathway for them to grow. So the model of Movement Park then became for the participation, for the volunteers, for families, for young coaches. And for those first 3 or 4 years, it was a proper juggling act, you know, the coaches. The difficult part of a model like that is bringing all those clubs together, all those different coaches, all those sports are at a completely different part of the journey, you know, like parkour and skateboarding. They're a lot still are out there as a lifestyle, and they're not quite a sport. Or are they a sport? Are they a street culture? Or, you know, so the coach education's all at different phases. The session planning's all at different phases. The mentality's all at different phases. So all these things were probably more problematic rather than the side of the funding and getting the doors open. So that was kind of more of a challenge, getting everybody aligned to each other in those early days.
What was the response like initially from the community? Was it a concept that they kind of grasped initially, or was there a bit of kind of confusion around what it was about, what it was trying to achieve?
Yeah, it was most definitely a confusion. Anybody that kind of knows me, I kind of go from start to stop at 100 miles an hour. And Movement Park, as I say, we capped the membership, a monthly membership. The people were like kind of, you get all that for only that at that price. So the kind of your money sometimes maybe was a catch, as in they didn't believe that you got all that for that price. Some people didn't know it as a community centre. We were doing a lot of youth work projects. Is it a youth work centre? Is it a community centre? Is it a sports centre? What is it? So yeah, so even the parkour community wanted it to be a parkour centre, and that understanding that we are not a parkour centre, we are not a skateboarding centre, we are. So that was a massive confusion, and to this day, I think it's getting better now with parkour. I think they're maybe starting to understand us. I wouldn't say that we teach parkour. We are now teaching a mixture of parkour. You know, what is it? So it's movement, and we're using parkour exercise as well as judo, as well as skateboarding, as well as ball. We ran physical literacy classes in the early days and nobody came. We changed that to ninja school, and now the classes are not mobbed. What is ninja school? Ninja school is a mash. That Movement Park mash now is starting to be all right. Okay, this current year, a lot of our sports have had to be taken off the table. Obviously, the contact sports, just like yourself, Rob, the rugby, they're no longer there. So indirectly, this past year has been pretty good for Movement Park because it's made us only be able to deliver parkour, skateboarding and ninja skills, and people are starting to understand the marketing is a lot more streamlined, the social media is a lot more streamlined, and people are starting to understand what we kind of do. So like any of these things, it takes time for the education, for the culture. There's still some people out there in the community that say, oh, you know, they're no parkour people, you know, who they to say they can do parkour. So it's very much about the how to teach something rather than being able to do a double back somersault. You know, we're not teaching double back somersaults, we're teaching movement, and it's just equipment or a mat or rolling, and you know, so it does take a while, but and I guess you've got to have a bit of a thick skin, because I've always understood what we're trying to do, and at the end of the day, we're only using these sports as the vehicles. It's not the sport we're teaching, it's the ethics and the morals, and we have a saying in the wall, your attitude determines your destination, and that is it. That's why we teach Kadama, that's why we teach juggling, that's because you've got to learn to fail. So this mad mash, like with the circus stuff, it's just pick it up, play with it, throw it into your session. If it's only 5 minutes, then great. You know, then you do break falls or judo, and then you relate that to say, oh, if you did more of that, go and do parkour. And then you say, okay, but you need to be able to do that on wheels, go and do skateboarding. And it's just movement vocabulary, isn't it? It's just confidence. And when you look at the stats, especially with girls, that they're falling off the radar. So you've got to teach these sports in a method that's almost youth-led, isn't it? It's youth work with a bit of sport added in, with a bit of family engagement. If you engage the family and the family feel confident, then you've got them for a longer time, and you can make more of a difference if mum and dad have, if you've got buy-in with them, or even if mum and dad are joining in with them, then we are making a difference to society. Then we are making a difference, getting mum not just to sit on her iPad and go and do the shopping, and it's a bit a further engagement for me, and that's what we're trying to do at Movement Park, you know. So yeah.
So talk us through, you've mentioned a few of the kind of activities that you've already got and a few of the kind of your approach to staffing and coaching. Talk us through, what does an average day at Movement Park look like? What are the kind of different array of groups and activities and coaches that you'd see across a day?
Again, it's changed a little bit because of the times we're in, but in general, we start early morning with our toddler sessions. It quickly became apparent that everybody that has a toddler thinks their toddler is the greatest toddler in the world. You know, I was the same. You think your toddler is more advanced than any other toddler. So we have toddler sessions, and we have parkour tots, we have wheelie tots, we have ninja tots, and we used to have judo tots. So these sessions are early morning sessions. They're all about bringing mums and dads in, and it's a family engagement. So the hall is set up to suit the activity, and we let them play. And then that's a bit slowly kind of teaching a mum or dad little progressions about, if he's doing that, then great, but try not to say great for something he should be doing anyway. Try and say great for the thing that is next over the line. Teaching them about how to jump properly and the impact, or how to roll properly, or how to get on the balance bike. So our mornings are generally starting with them. And what's interesting with that is we're starting to see a lot of those toddlers then come through to our early classes, because in the afternoon we predominantly deal with schools, or we had disability like boccia and things like that in the afternoon. And then we are out to the schools all day. So we've got school programs. And then about 4 o'clock, we start our nighttime sessions. And that pretty much goes from 4 to 7, 7 to 9, 9 to 11, and then keeping on going up till the adults. And each night is a different activity. But what the kids are allowed to do is if you pay your membership, you can come to as many sessions in the week as possible. So even through lockdown, we had parkour, skateboarding, and ninja classes. So, and there's 2 of them each week. Some parkour's 3, 4. So you can come to as many sessions as you like. You just book yourself in for your age group. And what we do is we move kids up and down depending on their ability. There's no any catchment area as in you must do your age group. It has to be more flexible than that. And what we are seeing is we're seeing kids that are doing their ninja classes twice a week, jumping on the skateboard, have done a bit of judo, and are doing some parkour. Even at 8 and 9, their movement competencies and their confidence to try new things is immense. So we're seeing kids moving from one sport to the other and not even batting an eyelid. And that's only, this is pretty much predominantly pre-12. And that's what we should be doing. We should be sharing our coaches. Our skateboarding guys are saying to them, have you tried parkour? All right, okay. So, and we've got development syllabuses now for each one of these sports. So we've created a program like the belts in judo for parkour, and we've created one for skateboarding. So you kind of know where each of your children are. So our normal part of the day is trying to get the kids to participate in as many different things. And the good thing about it is if they normally come on a Monday night to parkour and they're busy that night, they can come the Tuesday, the Thursday, or the Sunday. Or if they don't want to do parkour that week, it doesn't really matter, because we might see them at the judo club. So that is a special environment for a child to be brought up in, I believe. And their mums and dads, at least once a week, twice a week, maybe you'll see a mum or dad popping up. And we are seeing more families coming together to do parkour. Mums and dads are realising it's not about doing a double back somersault. And if I can't do a cartwheel, that's okay. We tailor the classes to suit. So it's very much a regular day is a very playful atmosphere. It's a very dipping in, dipping out. Many of the kids from the starting point are only other kids' starting points when they first walk in, but that's okay as long as you're kind of better than yesterday. As long as you're feeling good, and as long as you're not thinking about chucking sport. Pre-COVID, we used to have art club and coding club and guitar club and all these kind of things. And we pretty much threw them into the mix, Rob, because a lot of the kids that are on the spectrum find the hall far too busy. So by doing guitar or coding or an art club or t-shirt printing, these things were engaging with the community in a different way. We have girls programs only. So it's just trying to find different things of different ways to engage the community. And as I said, it's more of a using these things as a vehicle to engage and to inspire, to build confidence and competence, so that you don't just say, I'm rubbish at that, I'm chucking sport. So that's kind of much where we head and what we try and do.
It's really interesting because, like we said kind of before we got started, we all kind of pay lip service to long-term athlete development and trying and sampling different sports, but there's very few places where people could go to one venue and try a host of different sports without there being the obligation of, but you got to play for the football team on Sunday, or actually no, you can't do this because that's rugby training on that night. Like, to be able to fluidly transition, like as you say, between sports and try everything without obligation or without necessarily the commitment of a competition, etc., is quite unique.
Yeah, that is very unique. I mean, I'm very competitive minded, so for a large part of my journey, I was involved in about winning medals, and unfortunately, I guess that's the way the system's still built, isn't it? You supposedly get better coaching the further you go up. You get into a squad because you win a medal, and then blah blah blah, and then maturation hits me, and I can't poke myself in the eye because I've not spent time on physical literacy. So all those youths that come in. And it does take time to build a system, and we made a very conscious decision to start. We're going to go back and deal with the young kids, active starts, the fundamentals, and the kind of touching upon the learn to train phases from all these various models out there, from ballet to Kelvin Giles to better movers and thinkers. All these models that we're playing with, no model fits. You've got to take what you can from each of these things. So it takes time, and then as your system grows, then movement park children have never entered in a competition yet, and we're 4 years old nearly. That's an important thing, non-competitiveness. There's people in movement park gagging for competitions, but that's what it's not all about. So, and we will get there. As the structure gets stronger, then the levels need built on top. So we will get to learn to train and train to perform eventually. And hopefully maybe sports clubs will start coming out, local rugby clubs will maybe pop along one day and say, right, okay, who have you got here? Who is interested in that? And start using us maybe as scouting places for athletes of the future, or as we spoke before we came on, working stronger with rugby clubs or football clubs about injury prevention if you do judo, or movement park because they do parkour because of explosive movements and the change of direction. All these things are invaluable. And I think we will eventually get to that, but that non-competitiveness is very, very important. It's just that non-pressure to play, that non-pressure to change at the hat because I don't feel like doing judo this week. And to make that financially viable, which is extremely hard, to balance all your books at the end of the day as a sports club. Social deprivation, and it's going to be even more so after we get out of this crazy phase that we're at, as people financially can't afford to do sport the way it's been designed at the moment. Our hubs with Sports Scotland, there is a lot of sports in there, and active schools are driving them in, but none of these sports clubs are particularly talking to each other, or they all have different welfare officers and different outcomes and blah blah. Whereas with the movement part, we are an umbrella, and we don't let out the place. So everything is of the same philosophy, and it goes back to judo philosophy, the principles from judo and what that gives. But the urban sports thing is probably taking over. If you ask majority of people what movement park was, they'd probably say, "Oh, parkour place." that's only because parkour is very fashionable at the moment, and it's so exciting. It's in the video games, it's in superheroes, it's all over the place. It seems this new sparkly thing, and it's fantastic. I guess what we're kind of doing is a mash of everything, which is a bit of a unique model, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
It's really interesting what you're saying about the non-competitive side of things, because there's obviously always that debate around, competition or having a non-competitive environment. But I guess the problem is the kids who have, as you say, the competency and the confidence to be competitive have already got a platform for that. They can already sign up to their local football team or local rugby team and go and get that competition. But it's more likely the kids who don't have that confidence and competence that aren't going to do that. As you say, we lose out of sport because they haven't had that period of non-competitiveness to build that confidence and competence to then transfer potentially.
Yeah, I think so. But even when you're saying we don't have that competition, kids will find competition in the session. As we have wee kids that you're going, whoa, did you see that? Like, and I'm in the back of my brain, I am a competitive person. I'm going, he's going to be is he going to be doing the question I'm asking? Are they going to be doing judo, skateboarding, parkour, or where are they going to end up? It's irrelevant. And kids will create competition within yourself. A clever coach can make a competition like that in the middle of his session. You just have to ask the right question or put the right challenge in front of the person, and suddenly that competitive-minded kid just automatically makes it a competition, whether it's between me and you or whether it's between themselves of doing something faster, slicker, or quicker. So the word competition is such a crazy word. I guess when it starts to becoming, when I feel my confidence dipping, is when I'm not winning something and you don't put something around my neck, and we don't have kids training like Olympic champions at the age of 9 and 10, and they think their kid's going to be the next big thing when they're only 9. For crying out loud, he's 9. Give him a chance. Give him a chance to make mistakes. And we see that all the time, don't we? My son's in blah, blah, blah. He wants that tracksuit. Who they're competing for, the coach, the mum and dad. All these questions need to be kind of almost blown out the water. But I also understand governing bodies and systems of moving people through performance. So competition is a very wide spectrum. So to say that Movement Park doesn't have competition, we don't in-house, then at times it feels very much, yes, we have, because that's competition within yourself to get better. So it's interesting, yeah.
So what about, like, you obviously mentioned from a coaching perspective that you particularly decided to target younger volunteer coaches. What have you seen much progression there within there? Or is there much of a development pathway for them within Movement Park?
Yeah, I mean, most of our coaches now, again, since this crazy year, I was up to that point very much hands-on delivery, very much in every session. I was always there, and through lockdown, I've kind of very much made a definite decision that after lockdown, or we opened up for a short period there, I wasn't going to deliver any longer. A number of our coaches were young volunteers, and that created a bit of a rustle in the feathers in the community, as in, oh, you've not got supposed qualified coaches out there, or you're not doing the normal qualification that teaches you. And my kind of answer to that was, well, I've been involved in coach education a long time, and I'm level 3 judo, and I can understand when a safe environment is, and I understand about mentoring young people that are mentoring young people. But as you become older within yourself, and I'm a funny wee man with a grey beard and specs, then you kind of see the kids going, who's that old guy? You telling us what to do? So you need that bridging between you and the kids, and young volunteers can talk the lingo and the language. And how technical do you actually have to be teaching a child when it's just play? So does he need to be a level 2, a level 3, a performance coach, or is the inspiration and engagement more important? And I would argue that that's more important, because you don't come back for the sports session. You come back for the coach. You come back because that person's made that thing your world, or they've noticed something about you. So now that us going back, there's more. All of our coaches at Movement Park have been with us now 2 or 3 years, so they understand our system. They understand our delivery style. They understand that it's not just parkour. It's not just skateboarding. We're no judo. We are Movement Park. The parkour coaches, you'll see them in the skateboarding session. Well, they're not actually teaching the skateboarding skills. The skateboarding coach will do that, but they'll be second coaching, and vice versa. The judo coach, they're all swap over. So it is becoming a very much a Movement Park style, and that, I think that's key. So by having patience with those coaches, they have grown into a Movement Park. The Movement Park is the activity almost. And tonight we are just more verging on parkour, or we're more verging on something with wheels. So that takes a while, doesn't it? And that has caused me, as with these young coaches, with their chaotic lifestyles and their upbringings, it's not been easy a lot of the time. But like anything, if you have patience, then and you're always there to have a helping hand and understanding, or maybe not so understanding at times, hopefully your system starts to grow stronger, and hopefully we will be able to move away from or stay with active start, fundamentals, and we will get to learn to train and into more key technical phases of a child's development or a person's development. And I think we will start to focus on more adults because of the family participation. We are getting more adults saying, is there a skateboarding session for me? Or we've started on adults sessions. I think we will start to find it coming down the way. Because through lockdown, our membership has been shooting up because of things are closed down. So we are at this moment back to Sport Scotland asking for more facility fund to grow bigger. So that we can almost have a designated parkour area, a designated judo area, a designated skateboarding area, whereas logistically at the moment, because our membership has exploded and the system is growing, logistically sometimes it's hard to change over. So we're into the next phase, the next strategic plan. It will be interesting to see where we go, because I think a lot of people are starting to understand, right, okay, it's play, but the kids come for parkour. The kids come for a thing, or what they think is parkour, because I've seen Spider-Man doing it on their video games, or and at the end of the day, it's old school playing, isn't it? With equipment, it's movement, it's change of direction, it's all these things. It's hand-eye coordination. We have a physical literacy wheel that everything's underpinning to that fundamental process of being confident mover. If you're a confident mover, then so many more doors open up for you. Less injuries happen. All these things are underpinned by just being a nice mover, and having confidence to try that, So it's an interesting process, and it's been fun many times.
I mean, I guess your point earlier as well begs the question, what does a world-class active start coach look like anyway, or a world-class, train-to-train coach? Because as you know as well as I do, that all the coaching pathways are set up to gear to prioritize adult, competition. So, you do your minis rugby, and then you do your youth rugby, and then you do your adult rugby. There's no sideways development from how do you get to be a world-class under-10s coach? It's you go on to the next age group. Well, what if we never wanted to go to the next age group? What if I actually wanted to become the best under-10s coach in the world? Well, there's no development pathway for that, is there? Yeah,
no, but I think the pathway is just the fulfillment of your children being passed on appropriately, and the person above you then still having something to do with you, whereas 9 out of 10 times when you do pass that athlete on, that's you, it's broke, you don't really see it. You don't have any more contact with that athlete because it's a different club or a different area and stuff like that. Whereas to be a world-class under-10s coach, not to say that you can't move up or move down, but it takes a lot of encouragement just to stay there, just to be happy there. That's where you're good. That's where you are at. And I guess that's just you as a coach and your journey of where you enjoy. And I think that changes as you grow as a coach, or you have your own family, Where do I personally love teaching? I personally do still love teaching those little kiddies. I love seeing their faces when they come in and well, I kind of still like them maybe because they find my jokes funny. I don't know. Maybe
street.
that's it's two-way street. So maybe it's they're my level. And then I love the teenage years because that's when their brains are starting to question you or kick back against you, and so you just got to find where you're happiest, and hopefully your club structure is creating fulfillment for that coach, and giving them a pat on the back when I know wee Jimmy comes through and he's ready to move to that next level. Whereas if a wee kid moves through to another team and they're no underpinning, when that workload gets harder, if they've not got those underpinning things fixed, then they're going to drop out. So I guess with our model, we can see the kid moving through and the coaches can still dip in and dip out. But the young coaches that are dealing with these young athletes, they're fundamental. They are key. They're setting things up for the rest of an athlete's life. So you could argue they are the most important coaches, and you've got to give kids enough time to play. We stop playing too early. We move on to that. We're fantastic, aren't we, at the technical and tactical part? And kids competing like Olympic champions and having to learn this and having to learn that. You should be doing physical literacy your whole life, and your body changes all the time. You get young boys coming in, they kind of poke themselves in the eye, they kind of touch their toes, they kind of do a cartwheel, but they want to do a double backflip. So it's about creating different ways of stripping that back, and making them feel as if they are a part of the gang. Because the young boys that are coming in to teach, do want to learn to do parkour, they've watched YouTube to every hour of the morning and think they want to come in, but their fundamental skills, their legs are grown 2 feet in the last year, and these things, you have to have a different engagement at that point, because they're gone if you don't. They've got pubs, they've got drink, they've got drugs, they've got women, they've got all sorts of, they've got exams, so you need a lot of understanding at that age. But if I can catch them early on, then I guess we're kind of growing them from the grassroots up. We're changing. Sometimes maybe you could say, oh well, those teenager ones are gone. I'm not going looking for them. If they come to us and they find us, we've got to engage with them appropriately. But what we're really doing is we're starting from the ground, and we're getting our own community, and the community will grow with us. Families will grow with us, and I think that's how we can change stuff, obesity or physical literacy or all these kind of things. And that's the way we're trying to tackle it, Rob.
So for those who are kind of more interested in learning about physical literacy and about some of the things that you've mentioned, what are some of the resources that you would point people towards that maybe started to, spring a light bulb for you when you were looking more into this a few years back?
I spoke about Canada. Canada was always an ignition. When I went to the long-term athlete development conference over in Canada, I'd been paying attention to a lot of their stuff. And they are very focused on that long-term player development. I change the player into people. And they have a lot of fantastic resources. So if you look at Canadian Sport for Life, they have a lot of resources that are very easy to read. They've got it for coaches, they've got it for disability, they've got it for parents, they've got it in small chunks. And they kind of switch it over, which made a point to me. They kind of say, if you can't throw, catch, these physical things, these are the sports that you're going to find difficult. So instead of saying, to do throwing, you've got to be able to do this, and this. They say, if you can't do this, and this, it rules out that, and that. So it's a different way of flipping it over, which makes parents go, all right, so if you can't bounce a ball, he can't be good he's not going to be very good at basketball. He's not going to want to do basketball. So different resources like that. Better Movers and Thinkers was always a fantastic programme that did a lot for us. Kelvin Giles, all these things. But I think resources, you've got to just get out there, haven't you? You've got to find, and you've got to read, and you've got to, it's an own personal journey. And don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to go and watch a rugby club training and ask, you know, for different methods. I don't think we share enough. I think we're getting better at it. But as we spoke earlier before we go on, don't think sports coaches, you rarely hear a sports coach telling somebody to go to another club. I don't want to see you tonight. Go and play. Now, that's a really confident coach to say that, isn't it? It's like, because, and if I was an athlete, I remember it with my coach telling me to go and do wrestling. No, but I want to do judo tonight. No, go and do wrestling. But I remember the confidence of that coach, and I went back to that coach because he had the confidence to send me away. So that's a special connection, you know. So I think we've got to take a leaf from that book, and share more and play with your kids more. It's too easy to forget how to play with your kids or what we think is playing with our kids. So dip in and out and read as much as possible, and find your own way, Rob.
Definitely. So finally, where can people find out more about you and about Movement Park and what you guys are trying to do in Glasgow?
Well, we're in Glasgow on South Street. You can always come in and give us a visit once we open back up. We have an outside and inside facility there. Always welcome to send me an email and come and visit us. We're on Instagram. We've got a website, and we are very kinesthetic. We do, rather than about resources and blah blah blah. We are very much focused on our membership or our community and these kind of things. So give us a visit, and that's the best thing. How to understand more about us really is to come and get involved really. Whether you're a basketball coach, a judo coach, or whatever you are, we're open to play. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for your time, Stephen, and what you're doing at Movement Park sounds fantastic. So best of luck with that for the rest of this year and beyond. I really look forward to seeing how you guys develop and grow more.
Thank you very much, Rob. Cheers.